Silence is often misunderstood in today's world. People assume that if someone is quiet, they lack confidence, they don't have anything valuable to say, or worse, they're weak. But silence is not weakness. In fact, silence can be the greatest sign of inner strength. When someone chooses not to speak in a moment of chaos, it's not always because they don't have a response. Sometimes they have 10 responses, but they have mastered the art of choosing the right one. And sometimes the right response is silence. Think of a wise man sitting in a room full of people who are constantly talking, shouting, giving opinions, arguing. That man listens. He observes, he smiles. People may look at him and think, why is he not saying anything? But within him, there's a mind that's calm, steady, and reflective. He knows that words are not always needed to prove intelligence. The louder someone speaks does not increase the value of what they say. The volume of your voice does not determine the weight of your words. We live in an age where everyone wants to be heard. Social media platforms have become loudspeakers for opinions. The more vocal someone is, the more they're considered strong. But real strength is not in constantly speaking. Real strength is in knowing when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. It's easy to say what's on your mind, but it takes a great deal of character to hold back, to assess the impact of your words, and to stay calm in the face of provocation. Have you ever seen a lion hunting? It doesn't roar before it pounces. It's silent, patient, focused. It knows its power and doesn't feel the need to announce it. That's the nature of strength. It doesn't need to shout. When you're truly strong, you don't have to prove it to anyone. Your silence does the talking. Sometimes people mistake silence in an argument as a sign of defeat. But silence can be the highest form of response. Not every argument is worth your energy. Not every insult requires your attention. When people say something hurtful, the ego inside us pushes us to retaliate, to defend, to speak up. But wisdom teaches us to ask, is it necessary? Will this make things better or worse? And often, silence becomes the most powerful answer. A person once came to a spiritual teacher and started abusing him, shouting using harsh words. The teacher simply listened without reacting. After a while, the man got tired and asked, why aren't you saying anything? The teacher smiled and said, if someone brings you a gift and you don't accept it, to whom does the gift belong? The man said, to the giver, of course. The teacher replied, exactly. I didn't accept your anger, your words. They still belong to you. That's silence. That's strength. In relationships, silence can protect love. Words spoken in anger can never be taken back. The wise know when silence can prevent regret. In moments of emotional turbulence, when the heart is overwhelmed and the mind is clouded, staying silent allows space for clarity to return. It prevents damage. It gives space for peace to re-enter. It gives time for healing. It gives your better self a chance to show up. Silence also teaches us humility. It reminds us that we don't always have to be right, we don't always have to win, and we don't always have to respond. In being silent, we learn patience. We learn to observe. We learn to let go. We begin to realize that the world doesn't end if we don't express our opinion in every discussion. Silence gives us freedom from the compulsion to control everything with words. It gives us the opportunity to understand rather than be understood. In silence, we find maturity, because when you grow spiritually and emotionally, you no longer react to everything. You begin to prioritize peace over proving a point. And that choice doesn't come from weakness. It comes from deep strength, inner control, and a calm mind in a world that is obsessed with talking, expressing, posting, and sharing. Very few people have mastered the art of listening. Everyone wants to be heard, but very few want to hear. Everyone wants to speak their mind, but not everyone wants to understand what is on someone else's mind. And yet, it is through listening that we connect, grow, and understand life on a deeper level. Listening is not about being silent until it's your turn to speak. It's about being present with another person's words, emotions, and truth. When we truly listen, we do more than just hear words. We hear feelings, intentions, and pain. Often people are not looking for advice, they are simply looking for someone who will understand. But most of us are in such a hurry to reply that we miss the depth behind what someone is really trying to say. We hear the surface, but we miss the soul. We hear the story, but we miss the struggle behind it. There's a beautiful quality in those who listen with care. They don't interrupt, they don't judge. They don't prepare their next sentence while you're still speaking. They just listen. And in that act of listening, they offer healing. There's a kind of peace in being around such people because you feel seen, not just heard. You feel safe to open up because the silence holds space for your truth. Listening is also one of the deepest forms of respect. When we listen to someone, we tell them without using words that their voice matters, that their story is worth our time, that their emotions are valid. But if we are always rushing to speak, to defend, to advise, we end up speaking over their pain. And sometimes that can hurt more than silence. In relationships, listening plays a central role. Most conflicts don't arise because people disagree. They arise because people feel unheard. A partner may not be upset about what you did, but about the fact that you didn't listen when they tried to explain how it made them feel. Parents and children often talk at each other instead of to each other. Friends may grow apart not due to a major incident, but simply because one stopped listening while the other silently drifted away. Listening has the power to preserve love, to repair trust, and to prevent distance. But listening is not just important in relationships with others. It's just as essential in our relationship with ourselves. When was the last time you really listened to your own thoughts without distraction? When you sat quietly and asked yourself, how am I really feeling today? Not the version you present to others, not the answers you're expected to give, but the truth inside you that often gets buried beneath the noise of daily life. It takes silence to hear your own soul. It takes stillness to hear the subtle voice of your intuition. And it takes courage to truly listen to what that voice is saying. Listening also opens the door to learning. When you speak, you're repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you have the chance to learn something new. Even a child can teach us something if we are humble enough to listen. Wisdom does not always come from age or titles. Sometimes it comes from the quietest person in the room, the one who doesn't speak unless there is meaning behind their words. But you will only catch that wisdom if you are listening with attention, not just with your ears, but with your presence. In every spiritual tradition, there's an emphasis on silence not just for quietness, but for deeper listening. Listening to the voice of the divine. Listening to the lessons life is trying to teach us through experiences, listening to nature which speaks without words. A river doesn't shout, but it teaches us to keep flowing. The sun doesn't speak, but it teaches us to rise again. The tree doesn't complain, but it teaches us patience. All of this is available, but only to those who are willing to listen. Life constantly throws situations at us. Some pleasant, some testing, and some that push every button we have. In those moments, the natural instinct is to react. When someone offends us, we want to respond. When something doesn't go our way, we want to express our frustration. When we're misunderstood, we feel the urge to defend ourselves. And while reacting may seem natural and even justified, it often comes at a cost we don't always see immediately. Every emotional reaction consumes energy. It draws from our mental peace, drains our emotional balance, and often leaves us feeling more exhausted than the situation itself warranted. Reactions are not just about what we say or do, they're about the emotional storm that brews within us. The racing thoughts, the rising pulse, the tension in the body, these are all signs of energy being burned. The more we react, the more we leak this energy. Imagine waking up in the morning with a full battery of mental and emotional energy. Every unnecessary reaction. Arguing with someone on the road, snapping back at a coworker, overthinking a comment from a friend, slowly drains that battery. And by the time the day ends, we feel tired not just because of physical work, but because we wasted our emotional charge on things that didn't deserve it. Silence, in contrast, conserves that energy. Choosing not to react is not about being passive. It's about being powerful enough to not let outer situations disturb your inner peace. When someone says something provoking, silence gives you space to decide how you truly want to respond, not from emotion, but from clarity. That space between stimulus and response is where your strength lies. That moment of stillness can prevent an argument, save a relationship, or protect your peace. There is a story of a monk who was walking through a village when someone started hurling insults at him. The monk stopped, looked at the man, smiled, and continued walking. A few people nearby asked him, "Weren't you offended by what he said?" The monk replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, whom does it belong to?" That simple act of not reacting gave him power. It didn't mean he didn't understand the insult. It meant he understood it so well that he knew it didn't deserve his energy. Often, we think that reacting is a sign of strength, that defending ourselves, arguing back, or putting someone in their place makes us strong. But real strength is in restraint. A calm mind is far more powerful than a sharp tongue. Anyone can react, but it takes wisdom to pause. It takes awareness to hold your tongue when your ego is demanding attention. And it takes maturity to realize that not every situation needs your involvement. Energy is our most valuable resource, even more than time. Because if your energy is low, you can't use your time effectively. You can't think clearly, you can't act wisely, and you can't connect deeply with others. When you're constantly reacting, your mind is always in defense mode. Hyper, alert, emotionally on edge, and prone to burnout. But when you protect your energy through silence, you gain the ability to respond, not from emotion, but from intention. There is also another dimension to this. When you stay silent, you give yourself the opportunity to observe the situation in full. Reacting quickly narrows your perspective. Silence widens it. It allows you to see beyond your own feelings and look at the emotions, insecurities, or misunderstandings that may be driving the other person's behavior. You begin to see not just what someone is saying, but why they might be saying it. And when your understanding deepens, your response becomes wiser. Even in day-to-day life, silence has the ability to prevent unnecessary conflict. Sometimes walking away from a heated discussion is not about running away, it's about choosing peace over chaos. Sometimes not answering a message immediately gives you time to craft a better response. Sometimes a deep breath and a moment of silence is all it takes to avoid saying something you'd regret for days. The world may see silence as doing nothing, but in reality, silence is doing everything. It is protecting your energy, guarding your peace, and preserving your strength for the things that truly matter. We often associate growth with noise, motivational speeches, passionate debates, loud celebrations of success. But the most profound growth doesn't happen under a spotlight or in a room full of applause. It happens quietly when no one is watching. Real inner growth, the kind that shapes our character and deepens our understanding of life, takes root in silence. Just as a seed sprouts not in sunlight, but in the stillness of the soil, human transformation begins not in noise, but in stillness. Silence creates the space for self-reflection. It allows us to meet ourselves, not the version we show the world, but the one we truly are inside. In the stillness, we come face to face with our thoughts, our patterns, our reactions, and our truths. And that meeting can be uncomfortable. Because when you're silent, there are no distractions to hide behind, no conversations to fill the space, no entertainment to avoid your thoughts. It's just you. With all your emotions, your desires, your doubts, and your dreams. That's where growth begins. Not by avoiding yourself, but by sitting with yourself long enough to understand what's really going on inside. The world is constantly trying to pull us outward. Tasks, responsibilities, conversations, distractions, they all demand our attention. But silence draws us inward, and it's only by going inward that we can truly grow. You cannot build a house by only decorating the outside. The foundation lies beneath in the unseen structure. In the same way, a calm and grounded life is built on inner awareness, not outer achievement. Silence gives us the chance to examine that foundation. Some of the most transformative experiences in life happen in solitude. Moments when we step away from the crowd and listen, not to the world, but to our own inner voice. That voice is always speaking, but we usually can't hear it over the noise. It's the voice that tells us the truth when we're pretending to be okay. It's the voice that nudges us toward change when we've grown too comfortable. It's the voice that reminds us of our values when the world tempts us to compromise. But only in silence can we truly hear it. Spiritual traditions across the world emphasize the importance of silence. Not because silence itself is divine, but because it creates the condition for divinity to be felt. In silence, we connect with something deeper than logic, something more enduring than emotion. We begin to feel the presence of peace, not as something outside us, but as something that was always within. That presence grows stronger the more we withdraw from noise. Not just external noise, but the internal chatter, the overthinking, the judgments, the endless opinions about how life should be. Silence calms the storm and allows clarity to rise. When we are silent, we also learn patience. Growth is not instant. A flower does not bloom the day it is planted. It needs time, nurturing, and stillness. In the same way, personal growth doesn't happen just because we read a book or attend a seminar. It happens when we take that wisdom and sit with it. When we absorb it, reflect on it, and allow it to shape our daily choices. Silence is where knowledge turns into wisdom. It's where thoughts settle and understanding emerges. Even emotionally, silence plays a powerful role. When we are hurt, angry, or overwhelmed, silence becomes the ground where healing begins. Not every wound needs a conversation. Some wounds need time. Some emotions need space. When we sit in silence, we don't force ourselves to fix everything. We simply allow ourselves to feel. And in feeling, we begin to release. That quiet release is what clears the path for growth. Great artists, thinkers, saints, and scientists have all valued moments of solitude because that's where ideas form and insights arise. Silence nurtures creativity, awakens intuition, and strengthens self-awareness. It teaches us to rely less on the noise of the world and more on the guidance of our own conscience. It teaches us that growth is not always visible, not always dramatic. Sometimes growth is as simple as sitting with a difficult feeling without trying to escape it. Sometimes it's the choice to pause before reacting. Sometimes it's the decision to rest instead of rushing. And these seemingly small choices made in silence are what shape us into more mindful, compassionate, and centered human beings. There is a sacredness in silence that no noise can replicate. It is in silence that we begin to notice the presence of something higher, something beyond the boundaries of thought and language. While prayers, chants, and rituals are beautiful expressions of devotion, silence is the language through which the soul converses with the divine. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness. In that awareness, we begin to touch something eternal. When we are silent, we are not trying to convince anyone, not trying to impress, not even trying to understand. We are simply being. And in that state of being, a deeper connection unfolds, one that doesn't rely on words or explanations. Silence is where ego dissolves. It's where the layers of identity, pride, fear, and desire slowly begin to fade. And what remains is our true self, raw and real, standing before the divine without pretense. In noise, we often forget ourselves. We get lost in distractions, pulled in 100 directions by opinions, information, and external expectations. But when we step into silence, we come back home, we remember who we are, not what the world told us to be, but who we have always been beneath it all. That remembering is deeply spiritual. It is the beginning of a reconnection with something greater than the mind can grasp. Look at nature. It speaks in silence. The sunrise does not announce itself, yet it awakens the entire world. The trees don't preach, yet they teach patience and rootedness. The river doesn't argue, yet it carves valleys with persistence and grace. Nature moves with a kind of silent intelligence. And in its presence, we too become silent. Why? Because deep within, our soul recognizes the divine in that stillness. The more we quiet the noise within, the more we hear the soft whisper of that divinity around us. Many saints and sages withdrew from the world, not because they didn't love people, but because they needed silence to hear the divine without interference. They went into forests, caves, or remote mountains to strip away the noise, the distractions, the endless chatter of the mind. And in that profound quiet, they found a connection that no book, no teacher, and no word could give. They found presence. They found clarity. They found that God was not far away, but closer than breath, hidden beneath the layers of noise they had carried for years. Silence is not about isolating yourself from the world. It is about tuning into a frequency that the noise has drowned out. Just as you can't hear a gentle breeze during a thunderstorm, you can't hear the voice of the divine when your mind is full of reactions, complaints, and arguments. But when you become silent, that inner voice begins to emerge. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It simply waits to be heard. And once you hear it, you begin to live from a different place, not from fear, not from doubt, but from stillness and guidance. Spiritual silence is not dull or empty. It is alive with presence. It is filled with subtle understanding. In that space, insights arise not because we think hard, but because we've stopped thinking long enough for the truth to surface. In silence, we realize that much of our suffering comes not from life itself, but from the stories we keep telling ourselves about life. And when those stories pause, healing begins. Prayer is when we speak to the divine. Meditation is when we listen. And silence is where both merge into one. You may sit in silence and feel nothing at first. No visions, no revelations, no sudden answers. But slowly, the stillness starts to cleanse you. It starts to soften the hardened places inside. It begins to release burdens you didn't know you were carrying. And though nothing may seem to happen on the surface, something sacred is shifting within. The world teaches us to chase, to seek, to strive. But silence teaches us to surrender. It teaches us that alignment with the divine isn't achieved through effort alone, but through allowing. Allowing ourselves to be still. Allowing ourselves to be open. Allowing grace to flow in, not through struggle, but through surrender. The more time we spend in silence, the more we begin to live from that sacred space. We start to respond not from impulse, but from presence. We begin to trust not because we figured everything out, but because we felt the quiet assurance of something greater guiding our path. Words are powerful. They can heal or hurt, inspire or discourage, build or break. But for all their power, there are realms of life where words simply do not reach. There are moments when silence carries more meaning than speech ever could. There are feelings that words cannot express, depths that language cannot touch, and truths that live beyond description. We are taught from a young age to communicate through speaking, but what we're not taught often enough is that everything we truly seek in life, love, trust, peace, connection, does not always come through words. In relationships, we often place too much emphasis on what is said and not enough on what is felt. A person can say, I love you 100 times and still not mean it. Another may never say it aloud, yet their actions, their presence, their patience say it every day. Real connection isn't just verbal. It's energetic. It's emotional. It's about the intention behind the words or the silence. Sometimes sitting next to someone in complete silence can make you feel more loved and understood than hours of talking ever could. There are times in life when people don't need our advice, our explanations, or our opinions. They need our presence. They need to know that someone is there with them, fully present, fully listening. Not just with their ears, but with their heart. And that kind of listening doesn't require constant talking. In fact, too many words can make someone feel even more alone, especially if those words miss the emotion behind their pain. Silence, when offered with compassion, becomes a form of love. It becomes a shelter. Think of all the most meaningful experiences in life. Falling in love, losing someone you care about, watching the sunrise, holding a newborn baby. These moments move us so deeply that words fall short. We try to describe them, but something always feels incomplete, because some parts of life are not meant to be understood through explanation. They are meant to be felt, to be lived, to be embraced in silence. The heart knows how to speak a language that the tongue cannot. In the pursuit of success, many assume that communication is everything. And yes, in many ways it is important. But some of the greatest opportunities don't come because we said the perfect thing. They come because we carried the right energy, the calm confidence in our demeanor, the integrity in our actions, the discipline in our silence. These speak louder than rehearsed speeches or flashy words. People remember how you made them feel, not just what you said. Your silence, your patience, your stability, those are qualities that leave lasting impressions. Even spiritually, words are limited. We can read scriptures, recite prayers, listen to teachings, but at some point, growth requires silence. Words can point us toward truth, but they cannot deliver the experience. That experience comes when the mind becomes quiet and the heart becomes still. It's in the silent space between thoughts that we begin to feel something higher moving through us. That subtle presence cannot be captured by language. It can only be experienced in stillness. There's also wisdom in knowing when words are unnecessary. When a child falls and cries, sometimes a hug says more than don't worry, everything will be fine. When a friend is grieving, your quiet company says more than any perfectly crafted message. When someone is angry, your silent understanding may diffuse the situation more effectively than counter-arguments. Words, when used wisely, are powerful. But when used excessively or without awareness, they can dilute what really matters. We often rush to fill silence because it feels uncomfortable. But not all silence is emptiness. Some silence is sacred. Some silence is full of understanding, of connection, of presence. And when you learn to sit in that kind of silence, without the urge to explain or impress, you begin to access a different level of communication, one that doesn't rely on grammar, vocabulary, or performance, but on authenticity. In our culture, speaking well is celebrated, but the quiet art of being is overlooked. Yet it is in that quiet that we build strength. It is in that quiet that we observe clearly. It is in that quiet that the right words, if needed at all, eventually come from a place of alignment rather than reaction. Because in the end, it is not how much we say that determines the quality of our life, but how deeply we live, how fully we feel, and how silently we carry the truths that words cannot hold